Maya stood near gate 23 of the busy airport, holding a small carry-on bag in one hand and her travel ticket in the other. She was dressed in her army uniform. Her boots were slightly dusty, her shoulders tired, but her eyes were full of hope and strength. After 11 long months overseas, Maya was finally flying home. People walked past her, some in suits, some in dresses, some with coffee in hand, rushing to catch their flights. None of them noticed the quiet young woman standing alone near the window. Maya didn't mind. She had never done this for attention. She looked down at her ticket, first class, C2A. A surprise gift from her commanding officer. "You've served with heart," he had said. "You deserve a peaceful journey home." Maya had never sat in first class before. Most of her travels had been in cramped seats with little space, squished between strangers or next to loud conversations. First class, to her, always felt like another world, a place where important people sat, where you got warm food and smiled at something other than a small screen. But today, thanks to that kind gesture, she wouldn't just be going home. She'd be going home in comfort. As she took a seat near the boarding gate, Maya gently reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded photo, her younger brother, Jaden, smiling with a missing tooth. Her grandmother had sent it during her first month in the camp and she had carried it with her every day since. He would be taller by now. She smiled softly to herself, imagining the hug waiting for her at the other end of the journey. The airport speaker crackled, "Flight 719 to Atlanta is now boarding. First-class passengers may board at this time." Maya took a deep breath, stood, and walked toward the gate. Her boots made soft thuds on the tile floor. As she reached the front of the short line, the woman checking tickets gave a brief glance at her uniform and smiled. "Thank you for your service," she said politely. Maya gave a humble nod. "Thank you." She walked through the jet bridge quietly, the hum of the plane growing louder with each step. She wasn't nervous, but she felt slightly out of place. She wasn't used to special treatment. Not after sharing tents in the heat, or patrolling midnight roads with sand in her eyes. She had grown used to discomfort. To sacrifice. Inside the plane, everything looked different. Softer. Brighter. Calm music played in the background, and the first-class cabin had wide leather seats, pillows already fluffed, and gentle lighting above. A few passengers were already seated. Most were looking at their phones or sipping from glass cups of juice. Maya found her seat 2A by the window. She moved forward and gently placed her bag in the overhead bin. Just as she was about to sit, a man in a blue blazer walked up and stood in front of her. "Excuse me," he said, frowning, "that's my seat." Maya looked up, confused. 2A, right? "Yes," he said, quickly holding up his ticket. "This one. You're probably in the wrong section." Maya checked her boarding pass again. "I think this is the right seat 2A, for today." The man raised his eyebrows and looked her up and down. Not rudely, but not kindly either. "Are you sure? This is first class." Before Maya could answer, a flight attendant came walking down the aisle. "Is there a problem here?" she asked politely. "This young lady is saying she's in 2A, the man replied, "but I think there must be a mistake. It's first class." The flight attendant looked at both tickets. Maya quietly handed over hers without a word. After a moment, the flight attendant gave a tight smile. "Yes, sir. Her ticket is correct. She's in 2A." The man blinked. "Well, could she maybe take another seat?" One further back. His tone wasn't angry. It wasn't shouting. But it held something else. Something that felt heavy to Maya. She looked at the man and then back at her ticket. She had waited nearly a year for this flight, for this rest. She had risked her life to earn this journey home. But she wasn't a person who liked to argue. Not in front of strangers. Not in moments like this. "It's all right," she said softly to the flight attendant. "I'll go sit in economy." "No, really, there's no need," the flight attendant began. "I'm fine," Maya insisted with a small smile. "It's just a seat." She gently took her bag down, gave a polite nod to the man, and walked back toward the economy section. The cabin was silent as she passed. A few passengers had watched the moment quietly. Some avoided her eyes. One or two tilted their heads in sympathy. Maya settled into a middle seat near the back of the plane. It had no extra leg space. No warm towels. No big windows. But she didn't complain. She just looked out the small round window beside her, hands folded in her lap. Home was just a few hours away. But right now, it felt very far. Maya sat quietly in the middle seat, row 28, between a man reading a book and a woman already falling asleep with her neck pillow. Her small bag sat under the seat in front of her, and her knees almost touched the back of the seat ahead. She adjusted her posture and stared at the tiny window. The sky looked soft, painted with fading sunlight. Atlanta wasn't too far now. Just a 3-hour flight. She had survived tougher things than this, but still, a small ache grew in her chest. She wasn't upset about the seat itself. It was something else. It was the way the man had looked at her. As if someone like her could never belong in a place like first class. As if wearing a uniform didn't mean anything. As if respect was only for a few people, and she wasn't one of them. Maya had learned to stay calm in pressure. She had stood guard during storms, carried her fellow soldiers when they were wounded, and skipped meals so a kid in a village could eat. But this moment, this simple moment on a flight, felt heavier than expected. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. Behind her, in first class, the man who had taken her seat opened his laptop and returned to his emails. The flight attendant from earlier, Olivia, quietly checked the cabin, but her heart felt uneasy. Something about the way Maya had walked back holding it all in with a gentle smile stayed in her mind. In front of Maya, two teenage boys whispered something to each other. One of them had seen what happened at the front of the plane. "Did you see that soldier?" he said softly. "They made her leave first class." His friend frowned. "Why didn't anyone say anything?" "I dunno. Maybe they didn't want trouble." In the row across from Maya, sat a kind-looking older woman with silver hair and glasses. Her hands rested on a knitting bag. She had seen everything too. Her name was Mrs. Helen. How do people think she doesn't belong there? She thought to herself. That young woman was strong and full of grace. She deserved better. Helen took out a small notebook from her bag. She didn't know what she was writing yet, but something inside her told her this moment would stay with her forever. Back in the economy section, a few quiet faces had started to notice Maya's presence. Even if no one said a word out loud, the air had changed slightly. The man reading next to her glanced at her uniform and said quietly, "Thank you for your service." Maya turned slightly, surprised by the kindness. "Thank you," she replied. It wasn't that she wanted attention. But this small moment of respect warmed her inside, like a candle in the dark. Another flight attendant walked by, offering drinks. When she saw Maya's uniform, she paused. "Would you like something, miss?" the attendant asked. "Just water, thank you." The attendant handed it to her with both hands, and for the first time, Maya noticed a small pin on her uniform. It was her brother's photo. She gave a weak smile and sipped slowly. Meanwhile, in the front of the plane, the teenage daughter of the retired pilot turned to her father. "Dad, that soldier, that girl back there," she whispered. "She was supposed to be in first class. I saw her ticket." The father, Richard, a former airline captain, raised an eyebrow. "She's not sitting up here." "No. That man made her leave. He told her she didn't belong." Richard looked ahead quietly and sighed. He had flown planes for 35 years. He had met war veterans, young and old, from all walks of life. He believed people in uniform deserved the highest respect. "She showed more class walking to the back of the plane than he ever will," he said gently. The daughter nodded. "What are you going to do?" He gave a small smile. "You'll see." A few seats back, Olivia, the first flight attendant, stepped into the staff area. She pulled out the flight's passenger list and found Maya's name. Then she looked again at the seat map. She didn't say anything, but her heart whispered something louder than words. This wasn't right. As the plane cruised smoothly through the sky, a quiet wave of understanding moved among those who had watched the moment unfold. Most didn't know Maya's name. Most didn't know her story. But somehow, even in silence, people could feel when something unfair had happened and that something needed to be made right. Maya, sitting in row 28, didn't know what was coming next. She looked out the window again and whispered to herself, "Almost home." But she had no idea. Home wasn't the only thing waiting for her. What happened next would change everything. The plane sailed smoothly in the sky, clouds drifting peacefully below. But inside, the air felt different now, not heavy, not loud, but full of quiet thoughts and unspoken words. People in economy class had settled into their seats. Some watched movies. Others scrolled through phones. A few dozed off under thin airline blankets. Yet, soft whispers filled the space near row 28, spreading like a story that everyone wanted to know, but no one wanted to say out loud. "Is she really a soldier?" someone asked. "Yes, I saw her uniform." "She was in first class but gave up her seat," another whispered. "That's not right," murmured a young man. "She should have stayed there." Back in row 28, Maya sat quietly by the window. She had already closed her eyes, hoping to rest, but her mind wandered. Her thoughts returned to her brother, her grandmother, and home, the life waiting for her beyond the clouds. She wasn't angry. She was just tired. She had fought battles far away, ones that no one on this plane could fully understand. But now, she felt like she was fighting a quieter one. The kind you keep inside. The kind where you have to remind yourself who you are, and why you keep going. Across the aisle, Mrs. Helen, the elderly woman with silver hair and wise eyes, looked over at Maya. She had been quietly knitting, but her hands had paused. This young woman had given up her seat without arguing. No loud words. No complaints. Just quiet grace. Mrs. Helen folded the soft blue scarf she had been making and reached into her purse for something. A pen. A paper napkin. Slowly, she began to write a small note in gentle handwriting. Meanwhile, up in first class, Olivia, the flight attendant, walked back toward the front of the plane. Her heart still bothered her from what she had seen. As she collected glasses from the passengers, She glanced once more at the man in seat 2A, the one who had taken Maya's place. He sat comfortably, sipping his drink. Eyes on his tablet. Not saying a word. Olivia had served on flights during storms, through long nights, and during busy holidays when passengers were stressed and hard to please. But something about this situation felt different. It wasn't just a seat change. It was something deeper. She didn't like the way it had felt, unfair, cold, quiet. Just a few rows back, in seat 5C, Captain Richard, the retired pilot, looked out over the cabin. He didn't like what he had seen either. His daughter, Lily, sat beside him, still upset from earlier. "I just don't get it," she whispered again. "How could someone act like that towards someone who serves the country?" Richard didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for Olivia, who stepped over politely. "Yes, sir." Richard smiled kindly. "I was a captain for 35 years. I know how flights work. Sometimes unexpected changes happen, but sometimes," he paused, "we're given a chance to do the right thing." Olivia nodded slowly. "I know. And I think, the right thing still needs to happen." Behind them, another first-class passenger leaned forward. It was a businesswoman with a red scarf. "I saw everything," she added. "That soldier handled the situation better than I ever could." A man with a kind face sitting near the window added, "I'd give up my seat for her in a heartbeat." A small wave was starting, not loud, not fast, but definitely growing. More eyes turned. More hearts felt it. Even the passengers who had missed the first moment began to ask themselves, "Why is that soldier in the back? Why didn't we do something sooner?" Back in row 28, Maya opened her eyes. The flight attendant was walking toward her again with a soft smile. "Excuse me, Miss Maya," she said kindly. Maya looked confused. "Yes. Our captain would like to speak with you. Could you please come with me for a moment?" Maya blinked, then slowly nodded and gathered her things. Whispers followed her again as she stood. This time, people weren't just watching, they were watching with respect. As Maya walked through the narrow aisle, past sleepy passengers and overhead lights, she didn't know what was waiting for her. Passing the rows of business coats and briefcases, she came closer to seat 2A once again. The man who had claimed it looked up, surprised to see her return. Then, a voice filled the plane, calm and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Maya paused mid-step. Every head turned. What the captain said next would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," a calm voice echoed through the speakers, and slowly, the noise inside the plane faded. Maya stopped walking near the front of the economy section. Every head turned. Passengers looked up from screens, pulled off headphones, and turned toward the voice from above. The captain paused for a moment before continuing. "There are many people on this flight today, families, students, business travelers. But there's one special person flying with us who deserves to be recognized." Everyone listened quietly, unsure of what was coming next. Private Maya, a dedicated soldier, is returning home after serving her country for almost a year overseas. She boarded this flight with a first-class ticket, but when asked to give up her seat, she quietly stepped back and chose not to argue. A soft gasp moved through the cabin, especially from those who hadn't seen what happened earlier. All eyes turned toward Maya. She stood frozen, her heart racing. That act of humility didn't go unnoticed, the captain continued. "So today, we want to honor her not just as a passenger, but as a hero. Private Maya, we invite you once again to take your seat in first class where you rightfully belong. Maya stood silently, her eyes wide. She could feel every heartbeat. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, a hand began clapping. One. Then another. And another. Soft claps spread like a gentle rain throughout the cabin. Some smiled. Some nodded. Some looked at her with tears forming in their eyes. Passengers stood to let her pass. The teenage boys beside her gave her thumbs up. The elderly woman with the knitting bag gently placed a handwritten note in Maya's hand and whispered, "For later, sweetheart." Maya's eyes welled up. She gave a shaky smile. She walked forward, this time not with heavy steps but strong ones. As she passed the rows, people moved aside respectfully. She still said nothing, but her silent strength filled the aisle. As she reached the first-class cabin again, the scene felt completely different from before. The man in seat 2A looked uneasy. He cleared his throat nervously and looked away, pretending to scroll on his tablet. He didn't say anything. And neither did Maya. She didn't need to. Flight attendant Olivia stepped forward and pointed to the open seat beside the window. "Private Maya," she said warmly, "your seat is ready." With one deep breath, Maya sat down and looked out the window with clouded eyes. This time, not from sadness but from something brighter. Something warm. Respect. The businessman beside her nodded politely. "Welcome back," he said simply. Across the aisle, the retired pilot gave her a small salute. His daughter beamed with pride next to him. Olivia came over and quietly placed a warm towel and a glass of water on her tray. "If you need anything at all," she whispered, "just tell us. We're honored to have you on board." Maya's voice was soft but steady, "Thank you. I'm just happy to be going home." The man who had taken her seat sank back slowly, now aware that many eyes had turned to him too, not with anger, but with quiet disappointment. The businesswoman in the red scarf leaned toward him and said gently but firmly, "Next time, think twice before judging someone's seat. Or their worth." He didn't respond. The plane glided on, and the world outside the window was calm. The clouds parted quietly as if making space for something good. Something right. Passengers sat back in their seats, but the energy in the cabin had shifted. Some smiled and returned to their books. Some whispered to each other about Maya, how graceful and strong she was. Others just sat quietly, feeling proud that they had been part of something honest, something that mattered. Hours passed. Dinner was served. But the one thing everyone remembered more than the food, was Maya's walk to her rightful seat. She hadn't said much. But sometimes, you don't need loud words to teach a big lesson. Sometimes, quiet strength echoes louder than anything else. By now, the plane had crossed state lines, flying steadily toward Atlanta. The sun had begun to lower itself behind the clouds, casting a calm golden glow into the cabin. Maya sat quietly in her first-class seat, still uncertain of how to feel about everything that had just happened. She looked down at the folded note from the elderly woman Mrs. Helen and gently opened it. A delicate, handwritten message read, "The world needs more hearts like yours. Stay proud, stay steady. You wear that uniform for all of us." Maya closed her eyes for a moment and placed the note gently in her coat pocket. No medal, no award, and no rank she had ever received made her feel as full as those simple words did. Across from her, Captain Richard gave her another quiet nod. His teen daughter smiled gently at Maya, then leaned over to whisper something to her father. You were right, Dad, Lily said. She is the real first class. The man beside Maya, an older businessman, cleared his throat and leaned toward her. I'm sorry I didn't speak up earlier, he said with honesty in his tone. People like me should have said something. Maya shook her head softly. Thank you. It's okay. I wasn't looking for attention. I know, he replied. But sometimes, the quietest people deserve the loudest applause. Behind her, Olivia the flight attendant returned with a small tray. On it were cookies, tea, and something extra, a little card drawn by a child in economy class. It had a picture of a stick-figure soldier, saluting, with the words, "Thanks for keeping us safe. You're a hero." Tears pressed on the edge of Maya's eyes again, not from sadness, but from feeling seen. Back in economy class, the energy hadn't changed. The story of what happened continued to spread and hearts continued to change with it. Even strangers who had never spoken to each other were now sharing quiet smiles. Some sat quietly, thinking of people they knew in uniform. Others wondered if they'd ever unknowingly treated someone unfairly, someone silent and good, like Maya. That moment on the plane wasn't just about a seat anymore. It had become something more. As the captain announced the plane's descent, Maya looked out the window. Below, the green trees and buildings of Atlanta came into view. Her heart beat faster. Not because of fear, but because home was now only minutes away. She remembered the days under the hot sun during training, the sleepless nights in the camp, the letters from her grandmother, and the video calls with her brother where he'd hold up good report cards to make her proud. Everything was leading to this moment. The tires touched the runway gently, and some passengers clapped as they often do. But this time, the clapping wasn't for a safe landing, it was for her. Unplanned. Uncoached. Just real. Applause traveled from the back of the economy class all the way to the front. Someone whispered her name. Another passenger stood to offer a salute. Even the man who once took her seat quietly hung his head, saying nothing. The doors opened. Before anyone else moved, Olivia walked over and softly said, "Private Maya, would you allow us the honor of letting you leave first?" Maya hesitated. "Are you sure?" "You've earned it," said the captain, stepping out from the cockpit in full uniform. "Please." Maya stood. As she walked down the narrow aisle, passengers rose from their seats. Some clapped again. Others placed their hands on their hearts. Not one person tried to rush out before her. By the time she reached the front door, the moment felt almost like a dream. But it was real. Outside the gate, a small boy stood on his toes holding a welcome sign and a bunch of slightly messy flowers. "Maya," he shouted. She dropped her bag and ran forward. Jaden, her 8-year-old brother, crashed into her with the biggest hug. His arms wrapped around her like he never wanted to let go. Behind him stood their grandmother, tears in her eyes and a smile full of pride. At that moment, Maya didn't care about where she had sat. She didn't care about who had doubted her or who had looked down on her. She was home. And everything she needed was right here in front of her. As they walked away from the gate, someone tapped on Maya's shoulder. She turned around and saw Captain Richard and his daughter. He held out a small piece of paper wrapped around something shiny. "This is a coin I received for 30 years of flight service," he said. "I've carried it all these years. But I think someone else should have it now." Maya opened it, touched. The words on the coin read, "In honor of quiet courage." "I don't know what battles you've fought," the captain continued, "but I saw the strength it takes to say nothing, and still walk with dignity. That, to me, is the kind of fight that changes people. Lily reached out and gave Maya a quick hug. Thank you for being an example. Maya looked down at the coin, then at the crowd around her. She whispered, maybe people won't remember my name, but I hope they remember how I made them feel. And they would. Days later, a photo of her walking to her first class seat with applause around her would go viral. The woman who changed a plane with silence, the headline said. School teachers shared the story in classrooms. Mothers shared it at dinner tables. And strangers thought twice before making quick judgments. Because of one quiet soldier, the world became a little softer. And as Maya walked away from the airport that evening, her little brother holding her hand, she glanced up at the sky, the same one she had flown through hours ago. The plane had landed. But her story had just taken off. 2 weeks had passed since Maya returned home. Life had slowly begun to feel normal again. No more early wake-up calls. No long marches in the heat. No sleeping with one eye open. She now slept in her own bed, helped her grandmother in the kitchen, and walked Jaden to school every morning. The sound of laughter had come back into her world, and it felt new each time she heard it. But the world hadn't forgotten. One morning, Maya sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in one hand and her phone in the other. An email notification appeared on her screen. Subject: We saw what you did. Thank you. It was from a small school in another state. A teacher had shared her story with 5th grade students. The children had written letters, drawings, and thank you notes and posted them online. One message read, Dear Maya, I want to be brave like you, even if it's quiet. Love, Talia, 10 years old. Another child wrote, You're the reason I said sorry to my friend after I hurt his feelings. My mom said you showed what heart really looks like. Maya read the messages with teary eyes and a soft smile. The moment she had once tried to forget giving up her first-class seat had now grown into something bigger than she ever imagined. It had become a lesson. A spark. A ripple that reached far beyond the walls of that plane. Later that day, while waiting outside Jaden's school, a woman approached her. Are you the soldier from the flight? She asked gently. Maya nodded. My daughter told me about you. The captain's speech on the plane? She said it was the first time she felt proud to be part of something right. Maya smiled kindly. That means more than I can say. The woman placed her hand over her heart. You may have been in the sky just for a few hours, but you lifted people for a lifetime. That night, Maya walked into her room and opened a box by her bed. Inside, she placed the captain's coin. Next to it, she placed the handwritten note from Mrs. Helen and folded drawings from the school children. She didn't know where life would take her next, whether she'd return to service, start college, or simply stay home for a while. But one thing was sure, she had flown home just hoping to rest. Instead, she had become a quiet symbol of courage. Not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't have to. The world had seen her. And now, it saw others like her too. Because of Maya, the next time someone looked at a uniform, or judged too quickly without knowing the full story, they would remember. True strength doesn't always speak loud. Sometimes, it just stands tall, and keeps walking.